What makes a man so influential that he earns a national holiday in his honor? Let's delve into the life of that man, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Born on January 15, 1929 in Atlanta, Georgia, King was destined to make a significant impact on the world. His upbringing in a deeply religious family planted the seeds of faith and compassion that would later become the cornerstone of his life and work. King's early life was not without its trials. Growing up in the South, he experienced firsthand the cruelty and unfairness of racial segregation. These experiences, however, did not embitter him. Instead, they ignited a passion for justice and equality that would define his legacy. From this humble beginning, King would rise to become a leading figure in the American civil rights movement, using his voice to challenge injustice and champion the cause of equality. So how did a man born in the heart of the Deep South rise to become a beacon of hope and equality? Opening. It was the 1960s, a time of great social unrest and a call for change. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a young pastor from Atlanta, Georgia, emerged as a beacon of hope in these turbulent times. His leadership was characterized by a steadfast commitment to nonviolence and civil disobedience, principles he adopted from his admiration of Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy. King believed in the power of peaceful protest as a tool to combat racial segregation and discrimination. His conviction was put to the test in the early part of the decade, during the Birmingham protests. This was a series of nonviolent demonstrations against racial segregation by King's Southern Christian Leadership Conference and local activists. It was in this crucible of peaceful protest that King penned his famous letter from Birmingham jail, a passionate defense of civil disobedience and a call for an end to racial injustice. King's eloquence and moral authority were further showcased in his iconic "I Have a Dream" speech. Delivered to a crowd of over 250,000 people at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., this speech was a defining moment of the civil rights movement. King spoke of a future where his children would not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. His words moved a nation and continue to inspire millions around the world to this day. But King's dream was not just about racial harmony. He also spoke out against poverty and economic inequality, believing that these issues were inextricably linked to racial discrimination. He championed the Poor People's Campaign, a movement aimed at addressing economic justice for all Americans, regardless of their race. King's leadership and advocacy brought about tangible change. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, both landmark legislation, were direct outcomes of the civil rights movement he led. Closing, but the fight for equality came at a high price. In 1968, the voice of the civil rights movement was silenced. A tragic event occurred on April 4th in Memphis, Tennessee. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a beacon of hope and a symbol of peaceful resistance against racial discrimination, was assassinated. The news of his death sent shockwaves across the nation and the world, leaving many in disbelief. A man who had devoted his life to the pursuit of equality and justice was no more. The assassination of Dr. King was not just an attack on a single individual, but an attempt to quell the burgeoning civil rights movement that he so passionately championed. But little did the perpetrators know, this act of violence would only galvanize the fight for equality and justice. His life may have been cut short, but his ideals, his words, and his dream lived on. Yet even in death, his voice continued to echo. In 1983, a new holiday was born from the ashes of struggle. This was the year when the tireless efforts of civil rights activists and the enduring legacy of Dr. King were finally acknowledged on a national level. Congress passed a bill to establish a federal holiday in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a man whose name had become synonymous with the fight for equality and justice. The journey to this moment was not an easy one, as the idea of a holiday honoring King faced opposition. Some critics questioned the cost of a federal holiday, while others argued that King's impact was not significant enough to warrant such an honor. But the advocates for the holiday were not deterred. They saw the holiday as a chance to educate future generations about King's work and the civil rights movement, and to encourage ongoing dialogue about racial equality. After a decade-long campaign led by King's widow, Coretta Scott King, and numerous civil rights organizations, President Ronald Reagan signed the bill into law on November 2, 1983. The law marked the first time the United States had dedicated a federal holiday to an African-American individual, a significant milestone in itself. Yet it took another 3 years for the holiday to be observed nationwide. The first official Martin Luther King Jr. Day was celebrated on January 20th, 1986. This day was chosen to be near King's birthday, January 15th, and it consistently falls on the third Monday of January each year. The holiday is not just a day off work or school, but a day of reflection, education, and community service. It serves as a reminder of King's vision of equality and his belief in the power of nonviolent protest. It gives us the opportunity to pause and consider the progress we've made and the work that still needs to be done. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day is more than just a date on the calendar. It's a symbol of the ongoing struggle for racial equality, a celebration of King's life and legacy, and a call to action. And so every third Monday of January we remember. How do we honor a man who fought for the rights of all? This question resonates across America each year as the third Monday of January approaches, and the nation prepares to celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day. From the bustling streets of New York to the tranquil neighborhoods of California, communities come together to honor the legacy of a man who has become synonymous with the fight for equal rights. The day is marked by a sense of unity and purpose as Americans nationwide participate in community service activities. These activities are more than just acts of kindness. They are a tribute to Dr. King's belief in the power of collective action to bring about social change. Schools, universities, and organizations across the country also contribute to the celebration, organizing educational programs that shed light on Dr. King's life and work. These programs often include readings from Dr. King's speeches, discussions on the civil rights movement, and lessons on the importance of peaceful protest. By educating the younger generation about Dr. King's principles, we ensure that his message of unity and equality continues to resonate through the ages. The day also serves as a reminder of the significant strides made in the fight against racial discrimination. It takes us back to the 1960s, to the Lincoln Memorial, where Dr. King delivered his iconic "I Have a Dream" speech, to the enactment of the Civil Rights Act, and to the Selma to Montgomery March that played a decisive role in securing the right to vote. Yet Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day is not just about looking back, it's about looking forward. It's about recommitting ourselves to the ideals that Dr. King championed and recognizing that the struggle for racial equality and social justice is far from over. And thus, we continue to carry his dream one day at a time. As we reflect on the significance of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day, let's remember that each of us has a part to play in realizing the dream of a society where everyone is treated with respect and dignity. Let's honor Dr. King not just by remembering his words, but by living them.